Great. Well, I'm delighted to be here in Trieste. It's my first trip to Trieste, and I'm really happy. It's such a beautiful place. So thank you for having me. And thank you to MIB Management Trieste and to Generali. We work closely with both organisations through our training programme, and Generali has been with us since the beginning, helping us to test and develop and innovate as we developed the International Integrated Reporting Framework. And Massimo himself is a bit of a hero at the IIRC. He's got this mantra that integrated reporting has helped change his personal and professional life, and it's hearing messages like that that makes the work we do actually bring to life, and to realise that it is changing the way that companies work and that companies think, and hearing mantras like that is really important to us and what we do. So thank you, Massimo. Where am I meant to point this? Perfect. Those were my 6 numbers. So who are we? So we are a coalition of businesses, regulators, investors, standard setters, framework developers, and the accountancy profession. So, for example, the Ministry of Finance China joined our council earlier this year to help bring integrated reporting to China. We've got the world's largest investor in BlackRock sitting on our council. We have bodies such as KPMG and all of the professional services firms. And we've also got our international integrated reporting business network, which companies such as Generali help develop and push the principles of integrated reporting further. So in all, we've got about 80 organisations on our council and about 100 organisations such as Generali in our business network. And these organisations all came together in 2011 with the idea. Oh, no, yeah.
Sorry,
so, is that working now? Oh, I'm going backwards. What are we valuing? So, integrated reporting, controversially, I think, might be the wrong word for what we're trying to do, because it makes it sound like this is about a report. But actually, a report is just the output. It's just the product at the end of a process. What we're doing is much more driving questioning and changing the thinking and the acting of businesses to ask, what are we valuing? What do we think is driving the real value of our organisations? And we say that for far too long, financial information has been put on a pedestal above all the other value drivers of an organisation. So we could turn to the regulators and say, hey, we've got this great idea, it's called integrated reporting, let's make everyone do an integrated report. But at the end of the day, we don't think that that would change anything. We don't think that that would change the way that the world works, that our markets work, investors invest their money. We're much more about the system change and the way that companies are thinking and acting. The governor of the Bank of England, MARKHAM, has put this into terms when he phrased the coin tragedy of the horizons. And his point that so many companies are looking at the risks and the opportunities in the near term, in financial terms, that they're not thinking about the future risks and opportunities that are coming at us, such as climate change. So what the International Integrated Reporting Council is doing is really making sure that companies are thinking about these issues and have a framework to think about how companies are creating value in the long term. Oh, keep on going backwards. So at the heart of integrated reporting is the concept of multi-capitalism. I like to think about it as a Rubik's Cube. So a Rubik's Cube has 6 faces, and we have 6 capitals: financial, manufactured, human, intellectual, social and relationship, and natural. And you could think of a Rubik's Cube as solved, as you've got your 6 faces, and you think about your human resources department thinks about the human capital, and your sustainability department thinks about the natural capital. But in reality, a business doesn't work like that, and a Rubik's Cube is a great way to think that actually you've got a lot of trade-offs, you've got a lot of interconnectivity, and you've got a lot of relationships that really symbolises how an organisation really works in reality. And we've worked with so many businesses that through starting integrated reporting have met colleagues for the first time. We've had CFOs sit down with the head of sustainability, and they'd never met before. And when we tasked them with writing down their business model, they all wrote down completely different things because they weren't working towards the same story of value creation. They all had their capitals that they were responsible for, and they were thinking in silos. And that's not the way that we're going to bring sustainability and sustainable finance to the world. So I've got 5 short stories of companies that have embedded integrated reporting and multi-capitalism that I think brings to life why this concept is so important. So take the SME Anglo-African. So Anglo-African is a very small IT company based in Mauritius. And they were profitable and they were doing really good work, and they decided to adopt integrated reporting. And then they realized that they hadn't been investing enough in their intellectual capital. They had a really great traditional IT company that was looking at traditional IT software, and they hadn't thought about putting investment into what the future technology in Mauritius could look like. So as a result of doing their integrated report, overnight, pretty much, they changed their business model, their entire focus, even though what they had been doing was profitable, to change it to something that they knew, because of the intellectual capital they'd put into their integrated report, could be profitable in the long term. Then take the Malaysian company Petronas Gas. They've had direct financial capital benefits through adopting integrated reporting. Through developing their integrated report, they were able to speak much more to investors about what the company's goals were, what its long-term vision was, and as a result, they've received a lower rate of interest on their loans from a Japanese bank. Then there's the Royal Bank of Scotland. The Royal Bank of Scotland adopted integrated reporting because of its social and relationship capital. Now, the head of the Royal Bank of Scotland, after the global financial crash, said that his bank was the least trusted bank in the least trusted sector in Britain, which is quite a thing to say about your own organisation. And they've adopted integrated reporting as a means of growing trust and a means of discussing with their stakeholders how they're going to work to create value, not just for their business, but for society as a whole. My next example is the company SAP. Now, SAP has done an interesting thing because it has actually monetized all of the different capitals and the effect that this has had on their business. So they've taken human capital and they've said that if their employee engagement index just goes up by 1%, this improves their operating profit by between 35 and 45 million euros. That's pretty incredible. 1% in employee engagement, they have said in their integrated report that improves their operating report. They're operating by 35 to 45 million euros. And when you put it in terms like that, you can see why human capital to an organization really is so important. And finally, to take it out of the business, but actually into the way that the world is running, the government of New Zealand has adopted multi-capitalism as the way that it runs its treasury. They've adopted something called the Living Standards Framework. And what they've done is recognize that economic prosperity in New Zealand can only be advanced in the long term through the management of the multiple resources that create value. So they've identified 4 of the IIRC's capitals as being relevant to lives in New Zealand and how New Zealanders are building prosperity. And they've introduced that as a way of recognizing the success that the Treasury is doing. So they're no longer just relying on financial capital as a sort of indicator of their success. So anyone that knows anything about integrated reporting will probably have come across our octopus model, which we lovingly refer to it because we think it looks a little bit like an octopus. So on the left-hand side, you have the inputs, the capitals that I was just talking about, your financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social, and relationship, and natural. And you take these inputs in your integrated report and you consider the risks and opportunities that they present, the strategy, your strategy and how they relate to your strategy, your performance, your outlook, and you consider this in terms of your external environment. And then you consider the outputs and the outcomes. So outputs and outcomes are very different. You might put out a product, that's your output, but an outcome is how are people using that product? How's it changing their life? How's it changing your business? So you need to be, in your integrated report, very, very understanding of the difference between what you're just putting out and the financial results and also the outcomes. So you have to think in terms of the capitals of your outputs as well. So the corporate reporting landscape, I've been working in corporate reporting for 6 years now, and I'm still a little bit confused. There are so many different requirements and standards out there. So WBCSD, which is the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, have said that if you do all of the ESG metric requirements out there, that could be over 1,000 metrics that you're putting together. And that's on the basis of there are 249 different initiatives that are developing ESG reporting metrics and standards. And that's quite a lot for any business to get their head around. So the idea of integrated reporting is that we're an umbrella, and this is a diagram that the International Federation of Accountants has put together. And the idea is that you can't just produce your financial statements or your sustainability report or your glossy communications outputs without really thinking, how do they all fit together? So we're the umbrella. And what we say is there's no point in putting out sustainability information if you don't say how it links to your strategy, how it's relevant, and does it really affect your ability to create value over time? And if it doesn't affect your ability to create value over time, then it probably shouldn't be in your integrated report. Because what does it mean to an investor? What does it mean to a stakeholder? If they can't understand why this information is important, then it's meaningless. So back in 2014, the IIRC set up something called the Corporate Reporting Dialogue. And the idea of the Corporate Reporting Dialogue is to bring together the major standard setters and framework developers in the corporate reporting field. So I'm going to throw some acronyms at you. That's IASB, the International Accounting Standards Board, FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board, SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, CDP, which confusingly stands for CDP, CDSB, which is the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, and ISO. And what we've done is, together, mapped all of their frameworks to this concept of multi-capitalism. So you can see that if you wanted to talk about natural capital in your integrated report, you might use the CDSB, the CDP, or the GRI framework. But obviously, if you want to talk about financial capital in your integrated report, you look at IFRS or FASB. Now, that was a great first step, but there's a lot more to be done. As I said, over 1,000 different pieces of metrics that companies are being asked to fulfill if they're going to use all of the different standards out there. So this November, we're excited to announce that we are launching a better alignment project in which all of the ESG reporting frameworks within the Corporate Reporting Dialogue will take the first real steps towards better alignment by looking at how their metrics align, what their purpose is, and to really consider how we can advance that towards integration and towards making this information more strategic. Oh, backwards again. So where is integrated reporting being adopted? So as I said, the IRC was formed back in 2012, and since then, when we put out our framework at the end of 2013, we have seen huge interest. It's spiraled almost. So we're now being adopted in, well, that says 65, but it's since then become 67 countries around the world, which is in every G20 economy and in 20 of the 28 European Union states. And a real driver of the adoption of integrated reporting has been corporate governance codes. So we believe that integrated reporting is best practice corporate governance. They're two sides of the same coin. And corporate governance codes have been the route to market where we've seen real adoption. So the South African Corporate Governance Code calls for integrated reporting, and now we've got over 300 companies doing it there. A couple of years ago, the Japanese Corporate Governance Code started calling for integrated reporting, and we've got 400 companies now there. And more recently, we've seen Corporate Governance Code recommendations in New Zealand, Malaysia, Botswana, and the Netherlands. So that's the real driver for adoption. And interestingly, all of these countries have different reasons for doing it. In South Africa, it was to do with corruption, and it was to do with making sure that they could sort out problems post-apartheid that were really, affecting South Africa, and that was the route. Whereas in Japan, it's been about long-termism, and it's been about developing relationships between investors and businesses. So there are lots of different reasons around the world why companies are moving towards integrated reporting. It's definitely not a clear-cut, this is why we're going to do it. So why are they doing it? Well, it's not just good for society and the planet. It's actually quite good for your business as well. So the National University of Singapore with KPMG have put out research that concludes that companies doing integrated reporting outperform those that don't. Nanyang University, now this is an interesting one because the professor at Nanyang University actually didn't like integrated reporting. She started doing her research because she wanted to disprove it and say it was all a load of nonsense. She actually undertook her research 4 times before concluding actually she was wrong and that you do get a higher market valuation if you produce an integrated report. It's positively associated with stock liquidity and firm value, according to Stanford University, and according to Harvard Business School, it leads to a more dedicated investor profile. And when you have a more dedicated investor profile, you're much more likely to tackle turbulent times, such as stock markets dropping and so forth, because they really are bought into your business and bought into your strategy. So, as we heard earlier, corporate reports have got far too long. What is the point in producing a corporate report if no one's going to read it? So back in 2014, and they have since moved to integrated reporting and got a lot shorter, I'm glad to say, but back in 2014, General Electric's annual report was 103,000 words long, which is 32,000 words long than Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Right, I do admit that Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is the shortest of the Harry Potter novels, so it is slightly cheating, but he did do quite a lot in his first year at Hogwarts. And so I don't think that General Electric needed 32,000 words more. And actually, the then financial chief of General Electric said, "Not a retail investor on planet Earth could get through it, let alone understand it." He said that about his own annual report. Why are they putting them out? What we need is to actually have reports that people use, people understand, and that investors make their capital allocation decisions based on. And another story about how too long annual reports, there was a great one in the UK when HSBC's annual report got so thick that postmen refused to deliver it because they were worried about crushing dogs on the other side of post boxes. They also have since moved to integrated reporting and have worked on cutting down their annual report. So the IIRC itself has just this month announced its news strategic phase when we're moving into our momentum phase. So 2010 to 2011 was when companies and businesses were coming together around the world to say, could this happen? And they decided, yes, this was feasible. And then between 2012 and 2014, we worked with companies such as Generali to really develop, test, and drive the innovation, which led to the development of the International Integrated Reporting Framework at the end of 2013. And for the last 4 years, we've been in our breakthrough phase, which has been about really inserting integrated reporting into the corporate reporting landscape and saying, you know, is this going to become a permanent fixture? And just last month, we announced that, yes, we have 30 examples around the world, including corporate governance codes, including support from the International Federation of Accountants, who have announced that they believe it is the future of corporate reporting, and the academic publications that I set through earlier that have said, yes, integrated reporting is here to stay. So at the start of this month, we launched our momentum phase, and we were delighted to announce our new chairman, who is Dominic Barton, the former global chairman of McKinsey, whose first decision on stepping down from McKinsey was to join the IRC Council because he believed in its importance in driving long-termism and developing strategy and strategic thinking. So, what are the key points of our new momentum phase? Well, we're going to do a lot more on integrated thinking. We've got the International Integrated Reporting Framework. We're developing best practice in integrated reporting, but we don't have so much of is real case studies of what integrated thinking really means. How can you break down silos? It's all quite theoretical at the moment, so we've put together a new special interest group that is really driving case studies on what this means and how big organisations such as the World Bank, who is one of the leading participants of this special interest group, can really bring together all of its different sections across the world to advance its mission to eradicate poverty, for example. We're also going to be focusing a lot more on adoption in the United States and China, which are two countries where we haven't seen much movement towards integrated reporting. And we've recruited the Ministry of Finance in China to join the IRC Council and who have put integrated reporting into China's 5-year economic plan. And in the US, we have recruited the former Group Chief Accountant of Microsoft, Bob Lux, to lead up our operations in the US. So we are starting to see progress there. We're going to mobilise the investor pool. There's no point in producing integrated reports if investors aren't reading them and aren't acting on them. So we're going to work with investors on the sustainable finance agenda and work closely with our new partners at CFA Institute and PRI to build investor awareness. We're going to promote the objectives of integrated reporting and facilitate the alignment of the corporate reporting system. As I talked about earlier, our major new corporate reporting dialogue project is being launched in November. And we're also working closely with the International Accounting Standards Board as they review the management commentary practice statement, which we think will move the management commentary much closer to the work of integrated reporting and to the ideals that we're putting forward. We're going to try and make it easier to adopt integrated reporting. We'll be producing guidance. We'll be working with organisations such as MIB Trieste through the training programme, and we'll be working much more with academics to build the evidence base. We're going to foster a policy and regulatory environment that supports this move. We've always said we don't want regulators to just regulate, because integrated reporting should not become a tick box that you just fill in and there you've done it. It needs to be about changing behaviour. But we're going to facilitate an alignment where corporate governance codes and stock exchange guidance and securities market regulators are really promoting it and removing any barriers to its adoption. And finally, we're going to maintain a viable and effective IRC. So sustainable finance has become a bit of a buzzword. It follows the Paris climate change talks and the SDGs. And really, I think it's a recognition that businesses and governments have to work together if they're going to make the changes that the world so desperately needs. And I was told a story last week that really brought to life to me why the sustainable finance agenda is so important. And it's about tuna fish. So a couple of years ago, a country in southern Africa, the government announced that it would like to raise $850 million to develop its tuna fishing. And so it went to banks and they said, great. And they thought, great, we're going to get all of these boats and we're going to catch all of these fish. And so they raised their money. And no one thought for 1 minute, and what, $850 million, that's a lot of tuna and that's a lot of fish. But what it turned out is that they hadn't raised this money for fish. They actually had raised their money because it wanted to build a navy. And so it took all this money and started building a navy and said, oh, it's for protection for the tuna boats. And not surprisingly, it lost all of its investors quite quickly. But what's astounding is, right, great, investors didn't want to invest in war. Well, we can all get behind that. But investors didn't think, well, 850 million euros of tuna, that could wipe out the entire sustainable ecosystem of the seas around this country. That would wipe out tuna supplies for years and years to come. And that's why sustainable finance is so important. Because great, you can make money by catching some fish, but are you really thinking about the future and the future sustainability and about the years to come and generations to come? So that story really brought to life to me why sustainable finance is so important, because agreed, we shouldn't invest in war, but also we shouldn't wipe out the entire marine system of a country. So we're delighted that the European Commission has announced its Sustainable Finance Action Plan, with its goals to reorient capital flows towards sustainable investment, manage financial risks coming from climate change, and to foster transparency and long-termism. Now, these are all issues that the IARC and our partners have been working towards for a very long time. And we believe that through the International Integrated Reporting Framework and the concept of multi-capitalism, we can bring about and support this behavioural change. Obviously, a lot more regulatory work and detailed metric works had to be done, but this is about the system and the thinking change that integrated reporting can provide. So what are the EU doing specifically on corporate reporting? Well, earlier this year, they did a fitness check of all EU legislation with 5 questions directly about integrated reporting and the benefits that integrated reporting could bring. And they had 380 responses to their consultation, and at a conference in November, we'll be announcing a new strategic direction for the public company reporting across the European Union. They also set up a multi-stakeholder platform for the implementation of the SDGs, which final report came out last week and encouraged the adoption of integrated reporting. And finally, through EFRAG, they're establishing a European corporate reporting lab to promote innovation and develop best practice in corporate reporting. And they have stated that a medium-term goal for that will be to look at integrated reporting. And why have they looked at integrated reporting? Well, the truth is that it's happening anyway. As the gentleman that was speaking beforehand said, that regulation should follow best practice, and Message is a corporate communications company in Europe that has been looking at the trends in corporate reporting internationally, and they have worked out that integration and conciseness are the 2 key trends that are happening across Europe in terms of reporting, making corporate reporting understandable, relatable, and linked to strategy. So what I want to say to everyone today is that integrated reporting might sound like a boring corporate reporting framework and that you don't understand how it's relatable, but actually, this is actually about driving real changes in behavior, in systems, in the way that companies around the world think, act, and communicate. So hopefully, we look forward to working with you all in the future to drive momentum towards integrated reporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you for your wonderful stories. Any questions for Juliet? All right. So,
why is the United States? Well, that's because, we have seen movement towards integrated reporting. There are over 25 or so big-name organizations such as Microsoft and PepsiCo moving towards integrated reporting. But in terms of signposting from regulators or corporate governance codes, we haven't seen currently movement. But Donald Trump did announce recently that he will be looking at reviewing quarterly reporting and the demands on quarterly reporting. And through our work with the organisation Focusing Capital on the Long Term, we're confident that the interest in integrated reporting over the next couple of years will develop.
Yeah, there is another question over there. Hold a second, we have the microphone.
I found out that the targeting in China and the US is different. Why is that? I mean, in China, you work with the financial administration, and in the US, as he mentioned, you work with a corporation. Why is that?
Well,
Can you tell us more?
Yeah, what we found internationally, there are so many different drivers for adopting integrated reporting. As I said, in Japan, it's about driving, developing communications between investors and businesses. In countries like Malaysia, they just want to be the best. They want to move to the best type of reporting. So they've skipped the last 20 years in Europe that we've been grappling in developing sustainability, and they've moved straight towards integrated reporting. In other countries, Sri Lanka, it's about winning awards. They prize themselves on winning awards. And what we found in the US is that long-termism and strategy, those are issues that really American businesses are finding of interest. Currently, we're probably seen too much as a sustainability initiative, but really what we've been discussing today and what you'll hear about integrated reporting is it's much more than that. It's much more about developing long-termism and strategy. So that's the real driver in the US. And in China, sustainability is a driver because they live every day with the effects of climate change. There is smog when you go to Beijing, though it's getting better. And so sustainability is a real driver, and the Ministry of Finance have recognised integrated reporting and the role it can play. And it's setting up a pilot programme with businesses in China so that it can really test and implement. And so I would just say that they're our partner locally, and we will be talking to Chinese businesses. And the largest nuclear company in China has recently moved towards integrated reporting. So we are seeing that there are early steps, but so it's different drivers in different countries. It's not one sort of clear story.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Juliet. One comment from my side about the simplification of the report and what is an integrated report for Generali. Since the beginning, we tried to simplify, and we saw in the management commentary the ideal host to embrace the new standards, and therefore, since 2013, in Generali, our management commentary, the so-called Relazione sulla gestione, it's our integrated report. And we see that also regulation, for instance, in the non-financial disclosure space, is supporting the management commentary as the ideal host. So our strategic information are in the management commentary. So in this case, we avoid to duplicate and to create an additional one as other companies. But as you said, every corporation has its own journey. Thank you very much, Juliet.